And we're live here on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, per usual. What's up, guys? Nick on the P2W Fantasy Podcast. Today we are going over some waiver wire moves heading into championship week here, week 17. So if you are still playing fantasy football, you are either playing for the championship, for third place, or for some sort of consolation prize. So I wanted to make sure, instead of doing a quick video, a little bit more of a personal live stream video for waiver moves, because tonight is going to be those transactions. So you need to make those claims today. So if you are tuning in live here, stick with me. We're going to run through some players that are available in under 50% of ESPN leagues. Let's go.
Play to win, no fear to give. I feel but I can't forgive. I go all in this time, yeah, I won't regret. I'll pick the best, don't trip, they don't understand. I play to win, yeah, I play to win. I play to win, yeah, I play to win. I play to win, oh, play to win. I play to win, yeah, I play to win. I play to win.
All right, so if you are tuning in right now, going through some waiver wire winners. So players to consider adding to your roster for week 17. Me personally, I was in 7 semifinals, only squeaked out of 3. So I have one home league dynasty, one home league keeper league, and then another home league dynasty that is also an IDP league. So pretty excited about that. Had a wild finish last night. I needed exactly 25 fantasy points from the Miami Dolphins defense, and I got exactly that. It was one of the craziest finishes I've ever seen for myself for fantasy, but it's been a wild ride. And I know that COVID, injuries, there's a lot of impact. So it's important to check out the waiver wire. So we'll get started with our first guy on the list. All right, that's not it. We'll go to the actual PowerPoint. There we go. So first guy on the list, and he might not be available in your league, but he fits the requirement. Rashad Penny. 44.2% roster in ESPN. So there's a shot that he might be available depending on the size of your league. But looking at his last 3 games, 2 of them were awesome. Week 14, 16 carries for 137 yards, 2 touchdowns, 26.8 fantasy points. Now this past week, 17 carries for 135 yards, a touchdown, 19.5. So this guy's been going off 2 out of 3 of his last games. And what is so juicy about his next game is that it's Detroit. We know it's a good matchup for running backs. This is a huge opportunity for him to have another week where he is a top 10 play. So as long as Rashad Penny is getting that work, he is a guy that is going to be a big part of some championship teams if you have him. If he's available, he's the number 1 waiver wire target at this point. I'm going to throw Elijah Moore on this list. He just got activated from the IR. You just have to pay attention and make sure that he is going to play. But if he does play, this is a guy that's well worth the pickup. Obviously, I'm a big fan of Elijah Moore. But during the span of week 7 through 13, following the bye, Elijah Moore was the wide receiver 3 overall for fantasy. He was awesome. He was going off. 3 out of 7 of his games during that span, he had 20-plus fantasy points. Corey Davis is not in the mix. Jamison Crowder did not play last week. They were depending on guys like Braxton Berrios to be an option for this offense. So if Elijah Moore does play this week, he could be a huge play because we've seen the big games, and one of those big games was actually with Zach Wilson, who has had a good week last week. So if he does play, he's one of my priority moves this week for the waiver wire. Again, he is under 50% rostered because some people may have dropped him during the weeks he was on the IR, but he's rostered in 46.4% of ESPN leagues. So he does fit the criteria. He's probably my number 2 guy to consider adding if available. Isaiah Mckenzie had a really nice week. This one has a little bit of an asterisk because I feel like part of him being good this week will be if Cole Beasley plays or does not play, because Isaiah Mckenzie was operating out of the slot, had an awesome game. He had 12 targets. He caught 11 of them. in this past week. He had 125 receiving yards. That was huge. He wasn't just a slot guy getting, 2-yard catches. He was getting the yardage, and he had a touchdown. He had 29.4 fantasy points. That is a huge performance. If Cole Beasley does not play this week, he is a priority pickup because it's the Atlanta draw. We know that the Atlanta draw is a very good matchup for wide receivers in fantasy. So Isaiah Mckenzie, a guy to consider. I think it's dependent on Cole Beasley if he's playing or not. But if Beasley's not playing, this guy just saw 12 targets, and he was extremely efficient with everything that he got. Next guy on the list, Alan Lazard. So he only had 2 catches last game. He had 5 targets, but he did have a touchdown. He had 13.8 fantasy points. Week 14, he had 20.9. So he's had 2 pretty good games as of late. 2 out of 3 of his last games, he's had a touchdown as well. So we know that in the past, we've seen the connection of Alan Lazard and Aaron Rodgers. It's a thing. Does MVS being in or out affect this? It's a possibility. But I think seeing him be productive, seeing him get the looks in the red zone, and then seeing the Minnesota matchup are all good signs for Alan Lazard. Minnesota is a top 3 matchup against wide receivers for fantasy. This could be a good day. This could be a good day for him. It just really depends on him getting the looks, the red zone looks, the targets. So I'm going to put Justin Fields and Trey Lance both on this list together. I'm going to lump them together because obviously you're not making the move for both, especially, in one quarterback redraft leagues. But both guys get good matchups here, in my opinion, games that they can win, right? Justin Fields gets the Giants. Trey Lance gets the Texans. I think with Fields, you have to make sure that he's actually playing this week. Lance should be playing unless there's some wild news that, they're going to force Jimmy Garoppolo to get out there and play. But I think there are 2 guys to consider streaming this week, obviously dependent on who you usually play for your quarterback position. If you are a guy, if you're a team that typically streams for the position, these guys both present upside because they both have a plus arm and they have a lot to work with their legs. Personally, I like Justin Fields better, just because we've seen it happen enough this season. He's had 4 games of being a top 10 quarterback for fantasy. Trey Lance had his 1 game where he was awesome too, but it's a smaller sample size. But 2 guys to consider streaming for this week if that is what you typically do, which some people do for redraft 1 quarterback leagues. So Jordan Howard, Boston Scott. Miles Sanders had the injury in this last game, which was unfortunate because I thought he was geared up for yet another good day. This one, to me, it's really dependent on what's going on with Jordan Howard and his COVID clearance. The Eagles head coach said that there's a chance that he could play this week. Might be cutting close to the wire, though. We don't know what that timeline is. If Jordan Howard does not play, I think maybe Boston Scott gives you a little bit more confidence because now you know that he's not going to split the time with Jordan Howard. But this is a really sketchy one to me just because we don't know what the split is going to be like. We saw in the past when Miles Sanders was out of the mix, Jordan Howard, Boston Scott, and even Kenny Gainwell was getting some touches. And we just saw last night in the Miami game how frustrating it could be when there's multiple guys getting similar touches. So, maybe a deeper league suggestion. Maybe if you are like destroyed at the running back position, you can take a look at the Eagles backfield here. Same with Rex Burkhead and Dare Ogunbowale. So we're just going to call him Dare here. But both guys. So Burkhead, obviously, with the Texans. Ogunbowale with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Burkhead just went off last week. That was great. If for some reason you played him, maybe in a deeper league. And James Robinson just tore his Achilles, which was terrible. Both guys should get the touches. For me, this is more of a desperation grab if you are hurting at the running back position because if we look at the matchups here, Burkhead against the 49ers, Dare against the New England Patriots, not the best matchups. More of a desperation ads. And I know the running back position is thin. We get these injuries. We've had COVID issues, so they should be available. They're both under 30% rostered in ESPN. So if you're really hurting for a running back play, you can look at one of these guys. But again, the matchups I'm not excited about. I guess what you'd bank on is that they're both going to get some decent touches here. I put Gerald Everett on this list, and to me, he's more of a safer play, but seeing 3 weeks in a row now above 10 fantasy points, I think if you are just struggling at the tight end position and you need that 10 points, this could be your ad. Again, 2 touchdowns in those last 3 games where he did have 10 plus fantasy points. He had his best game last game out of this mix. I think he had about 16 fantasy points. But again, some people really just need 10 points from their tight end position. This can be your 10 points right here. So he's a guy to take a look at just because he's had that consistency of being a safe play. Rashad Baiman, I'll throw on this list, more of a deeper league guy. I would take Elijah Moore first. I would take Isaiah McKenzie without Cole Beasley first. I would take Alan Lazard probably over Bateman as well. Here's the good about Bateman. He had those weeks where he dipped down to like 44, 45% of the snaps. The past 3 games, 65% of the snaps, 93% of the snaps, and 81% of the snaps. He had 17.3 in week 14. That was great. He had 12.6 in this past game. And he scored his first touchdown. So he's on the field more. He's getting involved more. And he's having these weeks without Lamar Jackson. So I think he is a guy, if you are in a deeper league, to take a look at. Just the pluses are he's scoring 12 plus fantasy points lately in 2 out of 3 of his last games, and he's on the field a lot more than he has been. So those are good signs for a Ravens offense that really, really needs to try and get some wins here. Josh Palmer, this is another asterisk ad. This is dependent on if Mike Williams plays or not. I think if Mike Williams plays, you're really just taking a dart throw at him scoring a touchdown. I like him better than Guyton. If Guyton plays, Guyton does a lot of running around on the field, and you got to hope for a touchdown. But Josh Palmer, and he's a good dynasty guy to take a look at. But Josh Palmer, when he's been given the opportunity, he's been good. Week 14, when he had 7 targets, so that's an opportunity. He scored a touchdown, 17.6 fantasy points. This past game, he had 6 targets. He had a touchdown again in 15.3 fantasy points. So I'm looking at 2 times recently when he's given the opportunity, what does he do? He scores, and he scores well for fantasy. So I think he's been productive with what he's got. But again, it comes down to, is Mike Williams playing? If Mike Williams plays, do you play Josh Palmer? Probably not. If Mike Williams is out, would I play Josh Palmer in the flex position? I'd take a shot on him. But again, this is another asterisk one just because we have to see who is in, who is out. Marquez Callaway. So, I think going down this list, we started really strong with the waiver ads, and then we start getting a little bit thinner, maybe a little bit deeper. Some people play in leagues where you only start 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, a tight end, and a flex, and 1 quarterback. There's some leagues. I ran a redraft league this year where we had 3 flexes along with 3 wide receivers and 2 running backs. So, guys like Callaway might not be somebody you look for in a thin league, but a deep league, you might. He was one of the only guys that really was doing anything in this past week yesterday against the Dolphins. He only had 8.6 fantasy points, but this was with Ian Book and a very limited offense. Week 15 with Taysom Hill, though, he caught 6 passes on 9 targets. Good sign. Targets are always a good sign for 112 yards and 17.2 fantasy points. So if Taysom Hill is the quarterback, I think he is more appealing. If for some reason we have another Ian Book week, I'm writing this one completely off, even in deeper leagues. But Callaway, it was a good sign seeing the 9 targets with Taysom Hill. This offense is better with Taysom Hill than it is with Ian Book. So as long as that lines up, then maybe it's a consideration to take a look at. I think we're going to get this waiver wire thing off the bottom of the screen as we get going. Got to add some more names to the bottom here. All right. Next on the list, Chicago's defense and special teams. So not being a Bears homer, but they are one of the only defenses that are under 50, 40% rostered on ESPN. And some people, again, stream their defense, so maybe there's more options available. I just saw in a league that the Saints defense was available. The Eagles are another one to take a look at, but Chicago gets the New York Giants, most likely led by Mike Lennon this week. Saquon's been terrible. Kadarius Toney and Kenny Golladay were just awful with their production, and it all kind of trickles down to Mike Lennon and whoever the quarterback is. Maybe it's going to be Jake Fromm. I mean, who knows? But Chicago has not had a great defense and special teams season, but it's a really good matchup. It's a really good matchup. And when you can plug a defense in against a backup quarterback or a third-string quarterback potentially, that's a good play, in my opinion. Foster Moreau, another asterisk one. If Darren Waller is again out, and Darren Waller hasn't practiced in a long time, so he's only 21.8% rostered, Foster Moreau. He's had some burner weeks where he didn't do anything for you when he got the opportunity, but the last two games, 13.5 and 10.7. Maybe not the most breaking weeks for him for the tight end position. But again, we see tight ends score under 10 fantasy points nonstop. So he had 9 and 4 targets the last two games. This is, again, dependent on Waller's absence. But we look at the matchup. It's against the Colts. The Colts are a top 3 fantasy matchup to tight ends. So if he is the starter, he's been decent, and now he gets a good matchup, then I'd have some confidence in Foster Moreau at the tight end position. That should be all of the waiver wire suggestions there. I know that, in some leagues, if I go to the trending sleeper and see who's available, I know guys like, Keyshawn Vaughn are on there. Take a quick look. I think Darrell Williams was on there, but he's well above 50%. I think he's like 60% roster, but you can take a look at him. Sony Michel's trending. He's not under 50%. So there's a lot of guys trending right now as far as ads go, but I try to keep it under 50% because we're trying to make it realistic for most fantasy leagues. So again, if we go from the top to the bottom, I think it goes from more of the priority to the lesser. There's some asterisks here depending on if guys are in or out, if guys are healthy or not. But take a look, be active. If you are playing for anything, if you're playing for the championship, for third place, for something in the toilet bowl, if you can still pick people up, if there's something on the line, make sure you stay active. Also, last bit of advice, if you don't need one of these players, but your opponent does in the fantasy championships, play the blocking game, go pick them up. If you have the opportunity to go in and grab a, Rashad Penny and he's available and maybe you're not going to play him for whatever reason, but your opponent would. It's a smart move to play the blocking game. So be strategic about it. These should run over from tonight. So go check out who is available, who is not. Maybe only one or two of these guys is available, and one of the guys at the bottom of the list are one of those only guys, and that helps your team. Whatever helps your team get that dub. Good luck this week in the Fantasy Football 2021 season championship. At me on Twitter at any time to ask for start and sit questions. Always available to talk there. Good luck, guys.